Hello everyone, and welcome to Arm Knitting today. This is a very simple project that you guys can do on your own. All you need is one skein of yarn, and you can make an infinity scarf, which looks like this. So there's a couple different ways. You also need a pair of scissors, so we can put those off to the side. There's a couple different ways you can do this. It all depends on how thick or how thin you want your scarf to be. So you can see here I have two examples. I have this gray one, and then I have this purple one here, which is almost twice the thickness. And you can see how thick that one side is there. And it also depends on the length. So what you need to know for knitting are two very basic things. It's each individual stitch. So you can see these loops here. These are all stitches. And then each individual row. So the rows, you count the loops. So 1, 2, 3 rows. Okay? So to get started, if you Google this or you look up how to arm knit online, it will probably tell you that you need 2 things of yarn. I'm going to show you guys a little trick so that you only need 1. So there are 2 ends to a ball of yarn. If you look on the end here, you can see that there's one that goes into the middle there. So you want to pull that one out, and that's your first end. And then the second end is what we call yarn vomit. And you're gonna reach into the hole on the other side and pull out the middle, which is a little weird. And there's no real right or wrong way to do this. You just kind of pull out the end. And somewhere in that end is your other end. And you're gonna put both of those together because to yarn knit, you need 2 strands of yarn, okay? And the first thing you wanna do is you want to measure it out about the length of your hands to the top of your arm. Okay, so you want to hold it out nice and long, and you want to do that 3 times so that you have a nice long working yarn. Okay, now to get started, the first thing we need to do is something called a slip knot. So what I'd like you to do is there's a couple different ways you can do it. I do it very quickly because I have quite a bit of experience doing it. But to get started, if you lay it on the table and make a loop like this, and you're going to twist it once so that there's an X down here. And you guys can see the X, okay? Then what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the top of the loop, put your finger on the X, and bring it down to the right and kind of spread it out so you can see the other 2 pieces in between it, okay? Then you're gonna grab those 2 from the middle, pull it up like that, and pull it tight so that you have a nice knot like that. And then that is gonna slip onto your wrist, okay? And you should be able to pull it nice and tight so it's snug against your wrist like that, okay? From here, we have what's called our tail and our working yarn, okay? But first we have to do what's called casting on, which means you gotta get your stitches onto your needle. And in this case, your needle is your arms and your hands. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna take the 4 pieces hanging down and you're gonna separate them like you did to tighten the knot, okay? So you kind of grab them with all of your fingers, take your pointer and your thumb, and separate them out like that, okay? Then you're gonna kind of bring them down so they look like this. And you'll see that you have a loop around your thumb and a loop around your pointer finger. And this is where you're gonna need to remember over, under, okay? So it's under, over. So you're gonna go under the first loop on your thumb and over the first loop on your pointer finger and pull it through the hole and pop it onto your wrist. Okay, so you'll see that I now have 2 stitches. Each stitch is 2 pieces of yarn, okay? And this is where the width and the length that I talked about before with my examples comes into play, because however many stitches you cast on, that's how wide your scarf is going to be, okay? In my case, I like to do about an 8. That's what this gray one is. There's 8 stitches across. It's a little bit thinner, but I don't like super thick scarves. So if you want it thicker, you can go all the way up to 12 stitches. It depends on how you like it to be. The more stitches you cast on, the longer your tail has to be. So you may have to do another length. You may have to measure out another length of your arm if you want to go up to 12 stitches. But in this case, I'm gonna cast on 8. So I have 1, 2. I'm gonna once again grab all 4 strands, split them with my pointer and thumb, pull it down, go under and over, and pull it through. Okay, we're gonna do it one more time. Grab them all there, split, down, over, under. Okay, we'll do that 4 more times. If they're a little snug on your arm, that's okay. You can kind of pull them and maneuver them. Okay. So now I have 8 stitches on my arm. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And this is where the fun part comes in, okay? So what you're gonna do is you're gonna ignore your tail. Remember, this little short piece is your tail. You're gonna ignore it completely, and you're gonna take your working yarn, okay? Your working yarn comes from both ends of your, we call this a skein of yarn. So you're gonna constantly wanna be pulling at both strands so that you have enough out to work with, okay? And this could get a little crazy because you have one that's pulling directly from the middle and you have one that's coming from the outside. So it gets a little crazy sometimes, but you'll find a way to work it out that works for you. If it falls on the floor while you do things, also fine. I do that all the time. Okay, so you're gonna take your working yarn, make sure your knots are nice and tight. You're gonna take your working yarn and you're gonna bring it over your thumb and grab it with your 4 fingers, okay? So from the top, it should look like that. So one more time, take your working yarn over your thumb and grab it with your 4 fingers, okay? From there, you're gonna take your first stitch and bring it over your hand and put the loop in your hand onto your left. Grab your working yarn and tighten it up a bit. And this is where it might get a little loose because this is the first time through, but that's okay, all right? So now you're gonna do it again. Take your working yarn over your thumb, hold it tight, and bring the loop over your hand, and then put this one on your left, okay? Make sure you're pulling tight while you're working. Sometimes you might want to give your tail a little tug just to tighten it up. So you can see it looks a little weird and floppy here, but we're gonna go over the thumb, hold tight, over the hands, onto your left, okay? Over the thumb, over your hands, onto the left, and pull tight. One more time. Over the thumb, over the hands, onto the left. Over the thumb, hold tight. Over the hands, pull tight. Thumb, over, left, pull. Thumb, over, left, pull. Okay? And there you see you have your first row. There it is. Already moving toward the end result. So now you're going to go back to your right hand. So on this side, you're again over your thumb, hold it down, come over your hands and onto the right. And make sure you're pulling tight. Over your thumb, over your hand, onto your right. And you want to make sure that when you put the new loop onto your working hand, that you always want to go from this side. Try not to go from the front side. So you want to go, I guess it's front to back, not back to front, okay? So over the thumb, over the hands, front to back, and pull tight, okay? Over the thumb, over the hands, front to back, pull tight. over your thumb, over your hands, front to back, pull tight. Over your thumb, over your hands, front to back, pull tight. And you just keep doing this back and forth until you get to the end of the row. And then you can see you've got 2 rows now, okay? So you can see the little V's here. 1, and there's 1 here, 2, okay? So a typical infinity scarf is usually between 20 and 24 rows. This is not an exact science, and I often lose count. So typically how I measure it is I actually take it when it's on my hand, usually the hand I started with, so in my case, my right, and I wrap it around a couple of times. An infinity scarf should wrap around twice, so you wanna make sure that it wraps around your neck twice without choking you and without being uncomfortable. Okay, so we're gonna do a little bit of a speed up now. I'll do 1 more row slowly, and then we'll speed it up a little bit, and we'll get to the end to show you how to cast off, okay? So remember, over your thumb, over your hands, front to back, pull tight. Over your thumb, over your hands, front to back. Whoop. I got all twisted. Pull tight. And that happens, just try to keep your working yarn straight. Over your thumb, over your hands, front to back, pull tight. Over your thumb, over your hands, front to back, pull tight. And you can always pull on the scarf part as well, just to keep it tight. Over your thumb, over your hands, front to back, pull tight. And here you can see my yarn is getting tangled again, so I gotta pull some more out. Over your thumb, over your hands, front to back, pull tight. Over your thumb, over your hands, front to back, pull tight. Over your thumb, over your hands, front to back, pull tight. And when you get to the end of the row, make sure you pull it out so it's nice and tight. Okay, so here we go, fast speed. Okay, so we have a nice long scarf. I ended on row 23. When you end, you want to make sure that you always end on your left hand, or if you're doing this backwards, if you're a lefty and you end on your right hand, that is also okay. And you want to make sure that you have enough left to do another row. So you want to make sure you have a nice chunk at the end there. You don't want to run out of yarn. The upside to doing this with 1 ball of yarn is that you do use the whole ball of yarn. So you can see here I have a nice long scarf. It will wrap twice and make a nice infinity scarf there. And now we're gonna show you how to end it, okay? So the reason you wanna always end on your left hand is because we're gonna do something called casting off, okay? So you're gonna start just like you would any other row with the working yarn over your thumb, close your hands, pull the loop over, and go front to back. And you're gonna tighten it up on your right hand, okay? You're gonna do 1 more loop, so over your thumb, over your hands, front to back. So now you have 2 stitches on your right hand. And this is where it changes a bit. Now you're going to take the back loop and pull it over your right hand. And make sure you always keep track of your working yarn so you can pull the loop on your hand nice and tight, okay? So you're always going to have either 1 or 2 stitches on your right hand. So you're going to do another one from the left. So over your thumb, over your hands, front to back. Now you've got 2 stitches. Take the back one and bring it over your hands, pick up your working yarn and tighten it up. And you can see past my hand here that we're actually finishing off the end of the scarf. So you'll have a nice tight end, just like you did when we cast on, okay? So one more time, over your thumb, over your hands, front to back, pull it tight, take the back one, pull it over, and pull tight. Over your thumb, over your hands, front to back, pull tight, back over front, pull tight. Over your thumb, over your hands, front to back, pull tight, back over front, pull tight. Over your thumb, over your hands, front to back, pull tight, back over front, pull tight. And the last one, over your thumb, over your hands, front to back, pull tight, and you're going to pull back over front. So now you've got one stitch on your hands and a nice finished scarf on the other ends, and you can pull it a little bit to make it look nice. It should kind of look like a braid a little bit. And for this last stitch on your hand, you're going to take your working yarn, and if it's too long, mine's a little long, you can cut it. In this case, I'm just going to gather it all up, and I'm going to pull it through that loop and pull it nice and tight so that you get a nice tight end right there. Okay? And that is how you arm knit. But you might say, Miss Kate, it's not an infinity scarf. It's just a scarf. And this is true. And you can leave it that way if you'd like. But if you want to make an infinity scarf, which means it's one big circle, you're going to take this end and the other end, and you're going to weave them together. But this is the important part. When you look at your scarf all laid out like this, there's a front and a back to it. So this is the front, and this is the back. And you can see there's a different pattern. So the back of the scarf is the swirly wave pattern, and the front of the scarf is more like a ladder, okay? So what you want to do is you want to have the scarf with the back facing up, and this gets a little tricky, so you have to kind of maneuver it a bit. And you want to pull the ends together. So here you have your two ends, and they should both kind of look like a braid, and there should be a definitive end to each of them, okay? So you can see here that I have one here and one here. And you should have your tail over here and your tail over here. And this is where it gets a little tricky because you're just you're gonna do it the best way you can. I'm gonna cut my working yarn a little bit because it's too long. But you do want to keep it long enough that you can tie the whole thing together. So a little bit longer than you need isn't bad. So I'm gonna cut it about here. And I'm gonna take my longer two pieces and I'm gonna basically sew my ends together. So here's the end where my tail's coming out, and I'm just gonna sew it through the first loop there and pull it together. And you just kind of find loops of your ends, and you want to make sure it's the end. So you can see here, this is not the end, this is the end. So you may have to pull your scarf a little tighter to find the end. So here's the end loop, and you're just going to weave it back and forth between the different loops so that it ties itself together. And it's a trial and error thing. If you pull a bit out like I just did, not a big deal. You can just pull the scarf out and it goes back where it's supposed to be. And again, you just go back and forth so it tightens up. And you find the loops that'll work best to keep it nice and tight. And you can do this a couple of times. You'll see my yarn is long enough I can actually go up and back probably twice. I'm not going to do that because I'm going to show you what to do with the remaining tail down here. But you pull it back and forth like this through all the loops. Make sure you get through both loops. And you want to make sure that the ends line up nice and even. But again, this is a very forgiving scarf, so if you don't line up exactly, it's not a big deal. You just maneuver it until it looks good, is the deal. So here I've gotten to the ends. I'm going to do one more loop up here. Through it like that. Pull it nice and tight. And you can see that you now have, it looks a little messy, but it's supposed to look kind of like a braid right in there. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to bring this down a couple more times to the middle, and we're going to tie it off. This is very much a trial and error project. The first time I did arm knitting, it took me 3 hours to make a scarf. So if you think that you're behind, you're not behind, okay? All right, so what I'm gonna do now is I'm just gonna take one of my working yarn and weave it through, and then I'm gonna tie a knot. And don't tie it too tight, otherwise you'll pull all the yarn together, but you wanna tie it through, definitely double knot it. Sometimes you can even triple knot it, and that'll keep it nice and safe. And then of course you can trim those off. Now you still have this working tail down here, so you just want to do the same thing. Find a loop and weave it through so that it holds it together nice and tight. And then when you get to a point that you think is far enough up, you can weave through just one strand and tie your knots. Again, always double knotting, okay? You would normally trim these, and then you have your infinity scarf, and you're all done. There it is. Well done, everyone. If you have any questions, please let me know. I hope you have a fun time making your scarf and that it keeps you nice and warm. Thanks for joining us today. Bye-bye.